sometimes. So what you have is you have this geographical separation going on, and technology becomes a way for kids to bridge that. It also becomes a way for them to extend the time they can spend with their peers. It used to be you'd come home from school and you'd close the door to your house and maybe you'd make a phone call in the evening to a friend, but for the most part you were with your family or maybe your next door neighbor for the rest of the evening. And that's a very different situation now. So kids are able to maintain relationships and to be in constant contact with one another over the course of an entire 24-hour period. And we see that in the US at least being a real problem, where we actually do have kids that are losing sleep verifiably. We've seen this in research. And one of the big reasons they're losing sleep, they report, is because they are awakened in the middle of the night by text messages coming in from friends, and they feel compelled to have to respond to these. Otherwise, they're going to kind of be out of sorts with their friends. Age 16, 2006, again, we're looking at the average. We're looking at a 20-year-old, today's 20-year-old, today's university freshman. Guitar Hero, popular game at all? Yeah? Guitar Hero launches, Guitar Hero 2 at least. 97% of US teens play games, and again, a lot of these are very social games, and it's worth asking your students, what kind of games are you playing, who are you playing with? And even in situations where they're getting together and they're playing Xbox or PlayStation or Wii, very rarely do you see kids doing this alone. You see this boy here, he's staring at a computer screen. It's an art project that was done in the States. They filmed kids who were staring at video games. He almost has a saint-like quality to him, if you've ever seen his medieval paintings. Instead of looking up to heaven, though, he's looking up to World of Warcraft. And what's interesting is he's not in a room alone. He's in a room with other guys. And they're actually having a conversation, but they're at the same time transfixed by this media. And so there's some social interaction going on there. Age 17, these kids would have seen Twitter become publicly available. And there's been a lot of talk about Twitter worldwide. But interestingly, among teenagers, especially in the US, they're not interested. Very few of them are actually using it. And part of the reason is that Twitter is really more about the information than it is about the social relationship. Teenagers find it a lot easier to maintain that constant contact, that social relationship with one another through other forms. And the important point here is that teens are not interested in the latest technology per se. They're interested in what allows them to connect. And one of the things I really kind of want to drive home is to bring you to questioning whether it's the technology that kids are interested in or whether it's the way that it allows them to connect with their friends. Text messaging is about the most rudimentary form of communication technology we have right now. And yet it's one of the most popular ways that teenagers stay in contact with each other. And then we'll go here in a second. What are some of the effects? Let me pause and let me ask, what do you think it is? You kind of see these varieties of technology that have kind of inundated society. Do you see your kids using a lot of these different services? Do they look like American kids in some ways as far as the kinds of technology that they're using? Are they using less of it, more of it? Are they using different technology? What are you experiencing?
Lots of kids using MSN to chat, both just texting and on cam. Facebook, of course, NetFeed seems to be more for tweens and at lower ages. They tend to switch over to other networks as they grow up. Games, of course. We didn't add computers as gaming devices, but that's also a major thing.
Yeah, in the US, about 68% of kids use MSN or what we call AOL, Instant Messenger. Interestingly, it's been a slower adoption rate in most of Europe, for the reason that text messaging was more widely available to y'all, to everyone here before it was in the US. But
that's, of course, a technological thing as well. GSM, which has supplied text messaging from the start.
Yeah.
Also, you mentioned that Japanese networks have a different technology in the bottom, which also makes the use of it different.
Yeah.
Send emails.
Other, yeah.
I think you also see some boundaries being pushed by, for example, you have this chat roulette, where you just go online and just meet someone you don't know with webcam, and so I think there's a change going on. So.
Yeah. Is chat roulette still popular right now? Our experience with it in the U.S. has been, how many of you know what chat roulette is even? 3. Chat roulette was what we call, we're referring to it in the U.S. as a fad of sorts. It's not a persistent way that kids are going to communicate for 2 reasons. And let me explain what it is. It's a website out of Russia where this guy, basically just this guy working in his house, decided to create this system in which you could go online and you would be randomly connected to someone else who was on the chat roulette server, and your webcam would come on and their webcam would come on, and you could either sit and talk with them or you could hit, spin, and you get somebody new. Well, you can imagine what this becomes real quick. You've got a 16-year-old boy going, nope, not a good-looking girl. No, oh, now you're good-looking. Let me talk to you for a second. And then she'd hit spin because he was, so it goes around. And then it gets, more perverse from there. It becomes very problematic. But what we're not seeing there is kids actually returning to it. It's a novelty. Oh, this is kind of fun to try this out once or twice. But it doesn't really meet their deeper need of looking for relational intimacy. And this really goes down to the second piece. Why are they using it? And so they really are attracted to technologies long term that allow them to find what they're looking for, to use a good YouTube phrase. And in some ways they still haven't found what they're looking for, and they're looking for other technologies to fulfill that. Has anybody seen Formspring.me? Anybody heard of Formspring? Okay, I'll skip it then. Any other comments on what your teams are doing with technology right now? Okay, what are some of the effects of this? And this is still kind of that descriptive moment. We're kind of talking about what's happening. The first effect is that this is really changing our rhythm of life. And it's not just a matter that new technology is being introduced to society. That's happened for a long time. I mean, if you go back to the 14th century and 15th century and look at the invention of the printing press and talk about how that changes society. We have been through these changes and we continue to go through technological changes. But there's a difference this time. And the difference is the rate at which new technologies are being introduced to our society. In the early 20th century, you have radio that comes, and you have some time for society to generally figure out what they're going to do with that. And then television comes along, and you have just a few communication technologies that kind of inundate society over the course of really an entire century. But in the last 5 or 10 years, you have Facebook and MySpace and instant messaging and text messaging and all of these different kinds of technology. What it does is it messes really with our rhythm of life. It changes it. So in the US, to kind of give people an idea of what I mean by this, I asked them the question, at what time does it become really inappropriate to pick up your phone and call someone else's house phone? And in the US, everybody says, if you're in the Midwest, you say 8. And if you live in LA or New York, you say 9. Now, I asked the last group this, and I'll see if you have the same answer, because they all said, what's the time at which you feel embarrassed to kind of call someone else's house phone? At what time would that be inappropriate? Okay, yeah, good. You're Norwegian like the last group. Okay, good. You check out. Yeah, the last group went, like, instantly went, 10! And I'm like, whoo, okay, we got that figured out. At what time, let me ask you another question. At what time would you feel uncomfortable calling a friend's cell phone? 10? Later?
Yeah. But it's different because you can text someone.
Well, but I'm talking calling right now, so we'll get there in a second. You're actually going to pick up your phone. I know this is weird. Pick up your cell phone and actually call someone with it. And that's like in the U.S., teenagers are 7 times more likely to text than they are to actually talk with their voice. But what, 10:30? Is that getting too late to call somebody's cell phone? Maybe 11? Midnight? Be careful if you're friends with this girl. She's going to be calling you at all times of the day and night. Okay, so text messaging. At what point do you feel like text messaging is kind of too late? Okay, you're giving me the response that you should give, which is like, that's a stupid question. Because no time's too late, right? How about email? 2, 3 in the morning in your underwear? It doesn't really matter, okay? Because what we have is we haven't had these social conventions that have been built up around these uses of technology. It's not like the telephone was introduced in the early 20th century and the Prime Minister stood up and said, "Thou shalt only call till 10 p.m. And suddenly everybody in Norway went, "Oh, okay, great. After 10, we'll put it away." No, over time, social conventions start to build up. And so this will happen with text messaging and cell phone calls as well. But right now, we have so many technologies that have inundated us that it actually starts messing with the way that we actually relate together as a society. And so around the American dinner table, at least, when families gather, one of our big issues right now is everybody's bringing their electronic device to the table. And no longer is it really family dinner anymore. It's, you know, Junior's on his Game Boy, and Dad's emailing, you know, off to people at work, and Mom's on the phone, and suddenly you have what in America is the tradition of American family dinner gone. Because these technologies invaded and we don't know what to do with them. And new ones keep coming. And that's a problem. Because you can make rules around Facebook. And you can do this in your youth ministry as well. You're not going to hold your cell phone and do something during youth group. But what happens next week when, you know, there's a new technology that comes along that is implanted in people's heads or whatever, okay? And we have this problem with American churches right now where we have churches saying, look, you really shouldn't be using MySpace, but you can use Facebook. Well, what happens when NetBee invades America? You know, do we have to make a new rule for that? So what's happening is kind of our rhythm of life is being messed with. And we're going to talk about what to do about that in a few minutes. The second thing that's a problem is it's really changing ideas of belonging and community. Where do you belong? Of what community are you a part of? When you can bridge geographical distances, then suddenly your community can be anywhere. And what teenagers are doing is really building their own communities. No longer is the church their community, or the school their community, or even the club their community, but certain people out of each of those locations are part of this kind of social network that they're building. And they have a different understanding of how they relate to you. I've had numerous people say to me over the course of this week that they have teenagers who come to their youth groups, but then they go to the other, you know, they go to the evangelical youth group down the road, or the Pentecostal youth group, and they're members at all of them. And that's kind of disconcerting to us. And part of the reason is they have a different idea of belonging and community. Third thing is, it changes the tools of identity formation. Identity formation itself doesn't change. It's still a way that kids are going to develop that's psychologically guaranteed. But the tools they use to develop those identities are different than they were a few years ago. They are using Facebook pages to try on different identities. And so when I was when I was a fifth grader, I was about 10 or 11, I decided that I didn't want to be a nerd anymore. I was a nerd. I'm still a nerd. But if you're a nerd in the US, you just keep going on for more education, and eventually it becomes okay. There's always somebody nerdier than you in a PhD program. It's kind of fun. But I wore ties to school in 5th grade, which is not what you do in America. And I decided I was going to become a skater. I was going to get a skateboard, and I was going to be cool. So I went down to the local drugstore, which I found out later is not the place to buy a skateboard. The cool kids do not buy their skateboards in a drugstore. But I bought mine in the drugstore. I got my Converse All-Stars. Okay, you've seen those high-top colored shoes, and I went and hung out with the skaters for about a week and a half until I realized this is not me. And I ditched the skateboard and I went back to the ties, and the rest is history. But that's the way that I experimented with identity. And now you have kids that are building Facebook profiles and kind of putting a projection of themselves out there to see how people respond, to try it on through the way they present themselves online. And so the tools of identity formation change. And if we have time, we'll talk more about that. It also changes feelings about faith. And I'll leave that there because we will talk more about that. It definitely changes, though, the way that the kids think about God and God's relevance to a world that is always on. Where is God in my 24/7 technological world? Because God seems really absent. So changing our rhythm of life. One of the ways that this happens, this is where we'll get into the brain stuff, is in terms of kids multitasking. Doing Facebook while they're doing homework, while they're on the phone, while they're listening to music, and driving their car. Hopefully not. But they're doing a variety of things.